Certain revelations grip your heart so tightly that every unsaid word grows into a mountain, becoming heavier over time. Well, today is the day I reveal what this suffocation has been doing to me. The secret I've been hiding deep within. I admit that at 60 years old, something happened that made me feel more alive than ever before, and it occurred at the most unexpected moment. That morning, the hot water in the bathroom wasn't working again. The broken faucets and my disrupted routines reminded me just how much my life felt like a repetition of everything else. Loneliness, silence, and routine ever since my husband passed away. Whenever something in the house needed fixing, I had to call someone. I randomly picked a plumber from the phone book. Otis, the young voice on the other end, said deep and steady, "I can come over today." There was something in his voice, something I couldn't describe, but it made me curious. I tried not to pay too much attention. After all, this was just a faucet issue. But when the doorbell rang, everything changed. When I opened the door, the young man standing in front of me was full of an energy that instantly wiped away the dullness of my life. Otis dropped his toolbox from his shoulder and onto the floor at the entrance. "Is the bathroom this way?" he asked. I hesitated for a moment before extending my hand down the hallway. "Yes, yeah, just through that door." I led him to the bathroom door. The young man's massive build filled up the narrow hallway. His muscles were visible through the thin shirt he was wearing. For a moment, I couldn't help myself, my eyes fixed on him. I hadn't seen a body like that in so long. I couldn't stop my gaze from lingering for a second longer than I intended. When he entered the bathroom, he moved with such confidence, it felt like he wasn't just there to fix a faucet, but to open a door that had been locked for years. "Is this the faucet?" he asked, eyeing the old fixture on the countertop. Yeah," I stammered a bit. Why was I so nervous? This was just a repair job. I kept reminding myself of that, but my heart was stubbornly trying to write a different story. Otis bent down, checking underneath the sink. As he moved, his muscles under his shirt became even more defined, and I realized I was holding my breath without even meaning to. "It's a bit of an old system," he said, checking the pipes with his hands, "but we can fix it. It might take a few hours." His calm and confident voice caught me off guard. I hadn't interacted with someone so young and so self-assured in years. Maybe that wasn't the problem. Maybe it was that something I hadn't felt in a long time was starting to surface. I was thinking about leaving the bathroom when Otis turned around, his eyes locking directly with mine. "Can I grab a towel from over there?" he asked, pointing to a small leak in the bathroom. I brought my hand to my face, embarrassed. "Of course," I said quickly. I moved to open the cabinet, but my hands were trembling as I opened the door. When I handed him the towel, our hands brushed for just a moment. I felt that tiny touch resonate all over my body. In that instant, I realized that this was more than just a simple repair job. That brief silence between us seemed to carry the weight of years of expectations. "Thanks," he said, going back to his work. But that quick look in his eyes completely shook me. I kept thinking to myself, was it just a momentary rush, or had this young man awakened something that had been frozen inside me for years? As Otis bent down to fix the faucet, I kept pacing around the bathroom, My hands didn't know what to do. They were either tangled up or gripping the counter. The silence in the room was starting to choke me, but what really tightened my chest was his presence. My eyes kept drifting to him unwillingly. His youth, his energy, how focused he was on his work. I didn't know why, but something inside me was waking up that I hadn't felt in years. I felt like I had to say something. "Not many young plumbers," I said, realizing it was kind of an unnecessary comment. "How long have you been doing this?" Otis paused and glanced back at me over his shoulder. The moment his eyes met mine, I felt a warmth rush through me, but he clearly was trying not to notice. "I've been doing it for 5 years," he said, focusing back on his work. "Started as an apprentice, then started my own business." My curiosity was unstoppable. "How old are you?" I asked, my voice carrying a hint of admiration I couldn't hide. "I'm 26, he said without hesitation. I was surprised he was so young, but at the same time, I felt a flutter inside. His youth both excited me and strangely attracted me. I said, trying to smile, "If you hadn't told me you were 26, I wouldn't have believed it. You look more mature." Otis didn't answer right away, but I noticed a slight shift in his face, like what I'd said had thrown him off. After a few seconds of silence, he went back to work. His professionalism helped me pull myself together a little, but that flirtatious side of me was still there. "Want some coffee after you're done with the repairs?" I said, as if to change the subject. "I have a great coffee machine. People say my coffee is pretty damn good." He paused for a second, his shoulders tensing up. He glanced at me again like he was doing some mental calculations. "Thanks, but I've got some work to do today. I'll have to head out as soon as I'm done." I couldn't deny I felt a bit disappointed, but clearly, Otis was set on keeping things professional. Maybe that's what made him even more intriguing. He took his work seriously, never letting his professionalism slip, even at his young age. When he finished the job, I noticed him glancing at me a couple of times as he packed up his toolbox. Something in those looks. Attraction, curiosity, but also hesitation. "All done," he said, slinging the toolbox back over his shoulder. "The hot water should be working fine now. If there's any issue, just give me a call." "I will, for sure," I said, gripping the frame next to the door. "Thanks for handling it so quickly. Guess that's the advantage of youth." This time he smiled slightly, but still didn't break his professional demeanor. He walked toward the door, paused for a second like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. He just nodded at me and left. It felt like there was a bond forming between me and that young guy, something that should never have happened, but I didn't know where it was going. All I knew was that for the first time in a long while, my heart was beating fast. I couldn't help but ask myself, was this just a plumbing issue, or had this young guy entered my life to change something? The next morning, when I went into the bathroom to take a shower, I noticed the faucet was still only giving cold water. I don't know if I'd ever been so happy over a malfunction before. My hand was a little shaky as I found Otis's number in my contacts and called him. My heart raced as the phone rang. "Hey, Otis," I said, adding a little desperation to my voice. I think the faucet you fixed yesterday is acting up again. I'm really sorry, but would it be possible for you to come back? Otis's voice was as professional as ever, but he hesitated for a moment. Sure, I'll bring some spare parts with me this time so we can fix it for good. I'll be there in about an hour. I thanked him, and as I hung up, a weird wave of excitement spread through me. This time, I wanted to be somehow more prepared, but at the same time, I wanted to look unprepared. While rummaging through my wardrobe, my hand reached for my favorite black lace nightgown. Just something comfortable, I tried to convince myself, but I knew it wasn't working. When I looked at myself in the mirror, when the doorbell rang, I took a deep breath and opened the door. Otis's eyes wandered over me for a split second, but he quickly gathered himself. He had his tool bag with him, plus a few pipe pieces. Hey, I said, acting like my outfit was totally normal. I hope I'm not bothering you too much. This faucet is driving me crazy. Otis avoided my gaze and headed for the bathroom door. No problem, he said. I'll fix it for good this time. I followed him into the bathroom. As he bent over to fix the faucet, I noticed every move of his body. His hands were quick and skilled, but he seemed a little more tense. Does this kind of thing happen often? I asked, trying to fill the silence. The thin fabric of my nightgown brushed against my skin, making me feel even bolder. I mean, do the things you fix break again sometimes? Otis didn't look up as he answered. Sometimes, but this time I'm sure it'll be fine. I've got every part one might need with me. How careful you are, I said, giving him a slight smile. I guess you're really good at your job, even for someone so young. While I was reaching for the faucet, I accidentally brushed my hand lightly against his arm. Otis froze for a moment, but then got back to his work. He didn't even look at me, but I could feel his tension. I'm just trying to do my job, he finally said, his voice a little quieter. There was a silence for a while. His distant attitude made me even bolder. While he was leaning over to look at a pipe under the faucet, I briefly touched his back with my hand. Really hard to find someone as skilled as you, I said, my voice carrying a light, joking tone. This time, Otis straightened up and looked at me. There was something in his eyes, uncertainty, tension, and an attempt to hold on to control. Sarah, he said, even saying my name like he was trying to keep boundaries. This job's almost done. After this, I won't bother you anymore. But the harshness in his voice seemed to break for a second. Watching him try to escape from this situation stirred something inside me. It was excitement, a desire I hadn't felt in a long time. I didn't know how much longer this tension could last, but we were at a limit, and who would cross that line was entirely up to us. As Otis leaned over to fix the faucet, I leaned against the nearby cabinet and started watching him. The thin fabric of my nightgown fit my body more with every move I made, creating a rather provocative posture. Otis was pretending not to notice, but I didn't miss the slight tremble in his hands. The tremble was proof that he wasn't fighting me. He was fighting himself. Are you sure you know exactly what you're doing? I asked, adding a light, teasing tone to my voice. Otis didn't look up as he continued to work, but his breathing seemed to quicken. Of course, he said in a short reply. This is a piece of cake. Really? I said, stepping a little closer. Then why does it break again every couple of days? I bent down, pretending to grab a towel from the cabinet. As I did, the thin strap of my nightgown slipped off my shoulder. The way I felt wearing it just gave me more courage. When Otis looked up at me, his eyes stopped for a brief second. Then he quickly went back to his work. But this time he was moving faster, like he wanted to get this over with as soon as possible. Maybe there's something else in the bathroom causing the problem, he said, tightening the faucet, but his voice had a slight crack in it, trying to sound firm. Maybe, I said, leaning back against the cabinet. Or maybe the problem is just not finding the right touch. I let that sentence hang in the air. The silence suddenly thickened, and the tension in the small space of the bathroom became almost unbearable. Otis stayed silent for a moment longer, then put his tools down and stood up. His movements were slow, but the expression on his face was conflicted. On one side, control, on the other, a desire he was trying to restrain. I got even closer to him, and now the distance between us was less than just a few inches. I could hear his breath. "Otis," I whispered, my voice barely audible. But before I could finish, his hands were on my waist. Sarah's lips trembled with growing tension each second. The trembling in Otis's body signaled that something was about to change swiftly. The silence between us was broken only by our breathing and heartbeats. In that moment, everything collided. "Sarah, we shouldn't do this," he said, his voice weak and helpless. "Really?" I said, moving closer to him. "Are you sure, Otis?" At that moment, he hesitated, as if he couldn't take it anymore, and then unexpectedly kissed me on the lips. Our kiss started slow and uncertain, but soon the passion between us exploded. With our eyes closed, we locked into each other. Otis pulled me closer with every passing second, and we started moving towards the bedroom, bumping into walls as we went. Our hands tangled together, our hearts raced, and in a moment of wildness, I could feel everything changing swiftly. By the time we stepped into the bedroom, Otis had a firm grip on my waist, and without resisting, I quickened my steps. Everything had happened so fast that before I even realized it, we were caught in a physical pull. While my mind was still processing everything, my body had already surrendered to him. It was both a mistake and something irreversible. When we got to the bedroom, everything had suddenly fallen apart. Otis's t-shirt was in the bathroom, and his pants were on the floor by the bed. My thin nightgown was in the hallway, dragged across the carpet. Everything was a mess, and yet neither of us could calm down. We were lying on the bed, glued to each other, our bodies still touching, our every breath following each other. Everything had happened so fast that for a moment it was as if time had stopped. It was hard to describe what I was feeling. I felt like I was in the middle of a sea of emotions. Otis's strong arms were on my body. My eyes were closed, but somehow I could still hear everything. "Can you breathe?" I asked, smiling slightly, leaning my head against his chest. My hands were still on his body. I could feel every movement. "Yes," Otis said, his voice trembling slowly but determined. I guess yes, but I've never felt anything like this before. There was silence for a few seconds. At that moment, Otis's breathing got a little faster, and I couldn't ignore it. Really? I said, my lips still warm. So, what do we do now, Sarah? I don't know, but I guess everything is as complicated as it is right, he said, running his hands through my hair. But one thing is true. Having you with me right now is more than anything else. For a moment, I lost track of time. Everything in my mind was blurred. I was just enjoying the moment. But then suddenly, clarity returned to my eyes, and I wondered if this moment was really a moment of madness or something more. How do we explain this? I asked with a slight smile. Otis looked at me for a moment, indecision in his eyes, but also a deep desire. I don't think we need to explain it, he said slowly. Sometimes things don't need an explanation. We lay close together on the bed, our breaths mingling, caught up in the magic of the moment. But one question still swirled in my head. Was this just a moment of madness? Or was this the beginning of something else? Slowly looking into Otis's eyes, I asked, how does this end, Otis? Haven't you thought about it? Otis thought a little longer, then took a deep breath. We'll think about it later, he said, running his hands through my hair. Right now, let's just enjoy this moment. The emotions inside me shifted in a complex way, but one thing was certain. That moment was beyond everything. This night, this moment would be ours alone, and no matter what happened, it would remain unforgettable. Then there was silence, but this silence was an opportunity to understand more than the past, more than the future, more than everything. Father, this is my first experience, and your pencil is too big for me. Hello, my name is Lily, and I am 18 years old. My life has always been peaceful and quiet. It has been just my father and me since my mother left long ago, vanishing one day as if she had disappeared, leaving behind only voids that my father and I have filled with warmth and affection. We have always been inseparable, like two boats navigating the same stormy sea, guiding each other through rough waters. A few months ago, I started my university studies. It was a big change for someone like me, who was used to the stability of our small, sheltered environment. It was a huge adjustment: lectures, meeting new people, and navigating busy hallways, all of which felt exciting yet daunting. My father was proud of my efforts, though I could see his struggle with loneliness each time I returned home. His bright smile would light up my day, nevertheless. University life quickly became all-consuming. I began attending parties, mainly out of curiosity. The atmosphere was unlike anything I had experienced before. Loud music, unfamiliar faces, and a captivating sense of freedom that filled the air. It was a new aspect of life that I had never known before. After one of my first parties, I returned home late at night when the city was utterly silent. My father was in the kitchen, sitting with a cup of tea, awaiting my return. His expression was gentle, yet I could sense the underlying concern. How was the party? He inquired, trying to appear casual. "It was fun," I responded, avoiding details. He nodded, and silence enveloped us. An unusual tension persisted, which I chose to ignore. Each evening I left the house. That same unease resurfaced, as if he feared the outside world might change me. That evening started like any other, vibrant music, dancing, and a cocktail in hand. But this time, I allowed myself to indulge slightly. The warmth of the alcohol instilled in me a sense of boldness and ease, as if the entire world responded to my smile. Upon arriving home late, I found the door unlocked, as was customary when my father awaited my return. He was seated in the living room at his laptop, the soft illumination of the lamp highlighting his profile. Even at such a late hour, my father appeared composed and confident. His broad shoulders and toned physique, along with the tattoos visible beneath his shirt sleeves, attested to his commitment to physical fitness. His thick, dark hair was impeccably styled, with a few gray streaks that only enhanced his charm. I entered the room with a skip and, approaching him from behind, gently tapped his shoulders. I exclaimed, stifling a giggle. My dad jumped slightly, then burst into laughter, leaning forward somewhat in that way he always did when he was genuinely amused. "What are you up to?" he asked, catching the scent of my perfume and the alcohol on me. "I live life to the fullest," I giggled, feeling a slight dizziness wash over me. As he stood up from his chair and turned toward me, he gently yet firmly placed his hands on my shoulders. His touch was warm and steady, as if his hands were meant to shield me from everything. His eyes radiated tenderness, but suddenly I became aware of something different, something odd. There was something about the way his presence surrounded me, and the way his smile shattered the last remnants of my drunken calmness that made me pause. My laughter faded as I tilted my head back to meet his gaze. That look was everything: care, love, warmth, and a hint of reproach. But there was something else, too. Startled, I quickly stepped away, attempting to find humor once more to alleviate the situation. "You can always maintain a serious demeanor. Consider relaxing a bit." I gestured dismissively before retreating to my room. Yet once behind the closed door, I reclined on my bed for what seemed like hours, an inexplicable sensation lingering within me. His calm yet authoritative voice interrupted my thoughts. "Lily, go take a shower. You need to freshen up," he remarked, tilting his head as he spoke. I nodded slightly, deliberately averting my gaze from his muscular arms crossed over his chest. His concern had always been more than just a duty, but today it seemed to have a distinct essence. I proceeded to the bathroom, leaving the door ajar as it was customary for us. We had always possessed an implicit trust in one another. I activated the water, allowing the hot stream to envelop me, its warmth merging with the whirlwind of emotions in my mind. Under the shower, my thoughts drifted to him, his hands, which had grasped me so firmly moments prior, and a smile that seemed to penetrate the depths of my being. Each droplet of water that contacted my skin felt imbued with his essence, as if his touch lingered with me. I stepped into the cascade of water, experiencing its weight pressing against my neck and shoulders. As I gradually submerged, the warm flow enveloped me, disseminating heat throughout my body. My thoughts were incessantly dominated by his presence, This image occupied my mind entirely, permeating every aspect of my being. I endeavored to focus on the sensation of the water and the sound of it cascading. Yet his smile and voice remained vivid, perpetually residing in my thoughts. I noticed a movement from the periphery of my vision through the narrow gap in the door. I beheld my father observing me, his expression tender yet scrutinizing, with a subtle smile gracing his lips as if he were bewildered by his own presence there. My heart appeared to cease, and I inhaled deeply without attempting to hide. The water flowed over my skin, yet in that instant it felt altered, as if his gaze infused warmth into each droplet. We exchanged glances as if time had paused, memories of our previous effortless communication at a mere glimpse. His smile, imbued with soft warmth, has consistently been my most cherished possession. Even in my childhood, he delighted in snuggling near to me, playfully asserting, "Lily, you're my favorite person in the world," patiently awaiting my response. During those years, he consistently carved out moments for us to share something significant. We often wandered through the park hand in hand, as if we could shield one another from everything beyond our small world. Those walks were my favorites. We always paused at the tiny ice cream shop. He would say, "Chocolate," with a grin that highlighted the small dimple on his cheek. I always chose chocolate as well, establishing a silent tradition between us. When my ice cream inevitably melted in my hands, he would laugh softly, dabbing my sticky fingers clean with a napkin. He never spoke ill of my mother, even after she departed. He somehow mustered the ability to assert that she merely opted for an alternative existence, which did not suggest that I was insignificant to her. Yet I recognized the statements were false. I observed the alteration in his gaze whenever her name was said, as he concealed his anguish to shield me. To me, my mother resembled a shadow, a person who disappeared, abandoning us. I could not comprehend how she could abandon a man who was an extraordinary father. Over time, my animosity towards her intensified, yet he never fostered it. Instead, he imparted lessons of kindness, despite concealing the scars of his own heart. He endeavored to demonstrate the essence of love, even when his capacity to give was diminished. Reflecting on those moments, I recognized the profound impact he had on my life. His kindness, his smile, and the love he offered became the cornerstones of my existence. As streams of water cascaded down me, I stood there absorbing the warmth of realization. With my father still nearby, his smile conveyed a subtle apology for intruding on such a private time, yet his gaze remained steadfast. I had a surge of unease, but in an unexpectedly composed manner, I said, "Come in." He hesitated upon entering the bathroom, briefly glancing at me before swiftly averting his attention to grasp a chair beside him. He then took a towel and remarked, "You're soaked," his voice steady and familiar, yet I caught a faint undertone of anxiety. Moving cautiously, as though afraid of startling me, he approached and began drying me with the towel. He started with my shoulders and arms, slowly working his way down. His touch felt familiar, yet it also carried a strange newness that I couldn't define. I looked at his face, noticing the sharp line of his cheekbones and the strength in his jaw, and felt something unfamiliar stir within me. Every motion he made was deliberate and gentle, and when he bent closer to dry the droplets on my neck, I felt the warmth of his breath. An overwhelming and inexplicable sensation washed over me, as though we had entered a realm where ordinary rules no longer applied. The thought, "This is wrong," darted through my mind. It's unacceptable, yet I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. The body I had seen countless times now appeared different. His toned muscles, visible beneath his t-shirt, and the faint tattoos peeking from his sleeves grabbed my attention. He had always been fit, but I had never let myself notice him in this way before. My pulse quickened, and I was sure he could sense it. For a moment, he froze, still holding the towel, and his eyes locked with mine. It was forbidden, yet in that instant, it felt as though the world had abandoned its rules. His hands, strong yet gentle, carried a warmth that lingered. Everything about the moment seemed to defy what should have been. As he began drying my hair with the towel, I felt the tension that had built up in my body slowly begin to fade. His fingers moved gently over my scalp, smoothing the strands with such care that I couldn't resist closing my eyes. Water continued to drip from the ends of my hair, but every motion of his hands felt deliberate, as though he wanted this moment to linger indefinitely. When his fingers brushed against the skin of my neck, a wave of warmth surged through me, spreading to every part of my body. The tightness in my shoulders melted away as each part of me surrendered to the soothing sensation of his touch. The bathroom, bathed in soft light, seemed to transform into another world. Small, enclosed, and shut off from everything else. "Is it better?" he asked gently, his voice barely audible yet close. I nodded, keeping my eyes closed. My breathing had steadied, but my heart still raced faintly, resembling the flutter of a tiny bird. His every movement conveyed more than simple care. I could sense it in the way his hands lingered momentarily before resuming. "You need to rest," he said after a pause, placing the towel on my shoulders. I opened my eyes and looked up at him. His face was close, his gaze so penetrating that it left me breathless. "Thank you," I whispered, barely recognizing my own voice. He smiled, a faint crease forming on his face, a smile that had always comforted me, but now it stirred something deeper, something I couldn't ignore. The moment felt fragile, almost surreal, yet unforgettable. We stood so near that I could hear his steady, warm breaths blending with the gentle sound of water dripping from my hair. My thoughts were scattered, spilling over like the water pooling at our feet. Time seemed suspended, leaving just the two of us in this intimate space. My eyes met his, and there was something new in his expression, something I hadn't noticed before, or perhaps I hadn't allowed myself to see. It wasn't just care or love, it was something stronger, something that broke through the barriers I'd carefully built in my mind. I couldn't determine which of us stepped over the boundary first. Could it have been me, or could it have been inevitable? I leaned forward, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath caught as my lips met his for a fleeting moment. I thought he might pull away, but he didn't. Instead, his hands rested lightly on my shoulders before pulling me closer. He returned the kiss, soft but sure, as if reassuring me that he felt the same. Everything around us, the reminders of reality, faded away. There were no more rules, no restrictions, nothing but the overwhelming sensation enveloping us like the warm steam in the air. My heart swelled with something entirely new, something powerful and undeniable. His warmth and touch became a part of me, feeling as natural as breathing itself. As we broke apart, I noticed his gaze had deepened, revealing something he had perhaps kept hidden until now. "Lily," he murmured, his voice so tender that I knew nothing between us would ever be the same again. His hands tightened around my waist, and I felt a wave of heat rush through me, leaving no room for doubt about the gravity of this moment. It wasn't the chaotic drunkenness I had experienced an hour ago. This was something entirely different. My heartbeat aligned with his, and every touch seemed to amplify the connection between us. When I looked at him, there was no longer any hesitation. The emotions I had tried to suppress, everything I had kept bottled up, now spilled out freely. He felt it. I could see it in his eyes, and in the way his fingers trembled slightly, yet refused to pull away. My mind was clear. The haze of alcohol had long since vanished, but a new kind of intoxication had taken its place. A heady, all-encompassing passion that consumed us both. My breath grew heavier as he pulled me closer. "Are you sure?" he inquired, his voice faint, low, and hesitant, as if fearful of disrupting the fragile moment. I nodded, but it was insufficient. Placing my palm on his chest, I sensed his heart racing as intensely as mine. "Yes," I said, as his hands ascended higher, his fingers tracing the contours of my body, yet his touch was cautious, as though he feared I may dissipate like morning mist. Nevertheless, I was fully there, every part of me vibrant at that moment. The water continued to flow over us as he pulled me from the bathroom, and the air outside felt brisk against our warm bodies. I sensed only him. His steps were quiet yet purposeful as he gently carried me to his room. He laid me on the bed with the reverence of one performing a sacred ritual, every motion deliberate and unhurried. His hand brushed along my face, pausing at my chin, and he leaned to meet my gaze. "Lily," he murmured, his voice deep and tender, and I pulled him closer, unable to endure even a fleeting moment of separation. There remained nothing to restrain us. We became one, not merely in passion, but in the unspoken acknowledgement that something extraordinary had always existed between us. The room was steeped in silence, broken only by our breath. Soft light filtered through the curtains, wrapping us in a warmth that felt as though it existed beyond time itself. The bed beneath us felt like an island, isolated from the vast world, left behind the closed door. He leaned in, his breath grazing my skin, his touch confident yet gentle, as if memorizing every contour of my body. Each delicate caress sent ripples through me, awakening every cell with a pulse of warmth. My heart beat loudly in my chest, and I was certain he could hear. Yet his gaze held no urgency, only infinite tenderness. His eyes were so penetrating that I felt utterly bare, far beyond physical exposure. His fingers traced the curve of my face, skimming my cheeks before pausing at my chin and lifting my face. He locked eyes with me, and the moment brimmed with a silent understanding that nothing restrained us anymore. He leaned in again, and our lips met this time in a kiss that was slower, deeper, and filled with an overwhelming tenderness that made my chest ache. His hands glided down my shoulders, every touch imbued with intention, leaving me unable to control the way my body trembled under him. It was as though he could feel exactly what I felt, responding with such gentleness that I was overcome. The air between us grew warmer and thicker, with an almost magical energy that seemed to hum around us. Our movements were unhurried and deliberate, as though we were trying to etch every second into our memories. In that moment, we were entirely in sync, a perfect union where nothing felt artificial. Warmth wrapped around me, and I knew I would carry this memory with me forever. He was so unguarded and infinite. We lay side by side, wrapped in silence, though it was not the kind of silence that felt empty. It was a quiet that spoke louder than any words could. His hand rested lightly on my waist as I stared up at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what had just transpired. Thoughts were tangled, caught between reality and the meaning behind it all. Yet, in that moment, I felt neither regret nor shame, only the warmth and tranquility he always seemed to bring into my life. Turning my head, I looked at him. His expression was serene. However, his eyes, upon meeting mine, communicated significantly more than his expression revealed. I sensed he whispered as though he comprehended every thought I wished to transmit. I felt it as well. Perhaps it was inappropriate. However, he did not complete his statement, and all that required expression had already been conveyed by our gestures, our caresses, and the manner in which we regarded one another. "What is the next step?" I inquired gently, my stare wavering. His gaze fixed, his eyes softened, and a slight smile graced his lips as he extended his hand to caress my hair. "We are in no hurry," he responded. "We will continue to live as we did previously, but now we comprehend that this moment belongs solely to us. It is something we would bear in silence. No one would ever discover what transpired between us tonight, although I could never conceal it within myself as it had become integral to my being." He drew me nearer. I rested my head upon his shoulder. The steady cadence of his heartbeat provided solace, despite the multitude of unanswered questions that loomed ahead. I was unequivocally certain of one truth. This was our moment, our secret, impervious to external forces. The space between us was imbued with an indescribable, yet profoundly robust and intangible connection that intensified with each breath. The silence was not stifling. It had evolved into a silent observer of what remained incomprehensible to others. His hand glided softly along my waist, affirming that this was not a mere illusion, but a reality we had both opted to accept. I scrutinized his face, seeking confirmation of his shared sentiments, and discovered it in the delicate lines around his eyes, and a slight elevation of his lips in a serene, knowing smile. "Do you harbor any regrets?" I murmured, scarcely able to articulate. As he posed the question aloud, his gaze met mine with a certainty I lacked. "No, Lily, not for what is real," he declared, dispelling the last remnants of doubt. We refrained from discussing the future or formulating plans, yet I understood that this moment would be etched in our memories eternally. With my eyes closed, I sensed his breath intertwining with mine, and the surrounding world appeared to soften and quiet. Although the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, one truth remained. This moment was exclusively ours. His fingers traced the contour of my waist, leaving a trail of warmth that resonated throughout my being. The sensation of his breath against my skin anchored me in the present, a profound feeling that seemed to unite us as one.